On the morning of July 14, 2009, police in Jiangsu Province, Nanjing City, received reports of an unusual odor emanating from an apartment in the Lanshan complex. When authorities arrived at the scene, they discovered a horrifying sight: a female body in the hallway, a male body in the study, and the body of a young girl in the bathroom. Notably, one of the bodies had been partially dismembered. Through verification, police identified the victims as the homeowner Shu Jian, 43, his wife Xiaohong, 37, and their 7-year-old daughter. What shocked investigators was that besides the 3 unfortunate victims, there was also a living man at the scene, sitting dazed on a chair. This man's name was Jang Guo, an acquaintance of Shu Jian. According to his initial statement, he had been invited to Shu Jian's home for dinner before the incident occurred. When he saw the police enter, Jang Guo, with a panicked look, blurted out, "I killed them." Jang Guo was born in 1976 in Jumadian, Henan Province. Besides his parents, he also had a younger sister. Coming from a farming family with limited financial resources, Jang Guo was a diligent and hardworking student. Through his perseverance, in 2002, he was accepted into a master's program at the China Pharmaceutical University. After completing his studies in July 2004, Jang Guo was hired by a large pharmaceutical company in Nanjing, Jiangsu Province. As was customary for new employees, he was initially assigned to the marketing department. With a background as a scientific researcher and an introverted personality, Jang Guo struggled in the marketing environment that demanded strong communication skills. He was not only weak in business acumen, but also lacked the skills to build relationships with colleagues and clients. His job position became increasingly precarious. At his most difficult moment, a chance encounter helped him meet Shu Jian, who later became his superior and had a significant influence on his life. One Saturday in August 2004, Jang Guo was engrossed in reading Becoming a Sales Champion at a bookstore when he suddenly heard someone calling his name. Looking up, he recognized it was Shu Jian. Seeing a new employee spending time outside work hours actively reading to improve his knowledge, Shu Jian was impressed with Jang Guo's ambition. He not only encouraged him, but also left a message that if Jang Guo encountered difficulties at work, he could seek Shu Jian's support. Unlike typical empty promises in the workplace, Shu Jian truly kept his word and helped Jang Guo with his work multiple times. By September, when the probation period ended, Jang Guo's performance had not met requirements, causing the HR department to consider terminating his contract. In this critical situation, Shu Jian intervened, requesting that the company extend Jang Guo's probation period. Beyond that, Shu Jian continuously guided, shared experiences, and supported Jang Guo, ultimately helping him secure a permanent contract with the company. After officially being hired, Jang Guo sent a message expressing his gratitude to Shu Jian. In response, Shu Jian enthusiastically invited him for drinks, creating an opportunity for the two to understand each other better outside the workplace. In the intimate atmosphere of the drinking session, Shu Jian shared much about his personal life. Shu Jian explained that he was born in 1966 in Wuxi, Jiangsu Province, and had graduated with an MBA 5 years ago. His wife was 6 years younger, and they had a lovely 2-year-old daughter. Since his family still lived in Wuxi while he worked in Nanjing, he drove back home every weekend to visit his wife and child. Observing Shu Jian's life with his advancing career and happy family, Jang Guo couldn't help but admire him and viewed his superior as an ideal model in life. His gratitude toward Shu Jian deepened through the sincere encouragement and constant support Shu Jian gave him. The conversation continued after they left the restaurant. Upon learning of Jang Guo's difficult living conditions, a cramped old rented room, Shu Jian suggested that Jang Guo move into his apartment in Nanjing. Shu Jian explained that he was renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Nanjing, but mostly used it only on workdays, as he returned to Wuxi every weekend to reunite with his family. His wife and child rarely visited Nanjing. In this situation, inviting Jang Guo to live together would not only help him save on rent, but also prevent the living space from going to waste. Faced with this sincere and reasonable offer, Jang Guo happily accepted. However, the favorable period in Jang Guo's career did not last long. An unfortunate incident occurred in late October 2004. At that time, Jianguo happened to find and return a dropped wallet to a colleague. Instead of sincere thanks, the colleague jokingly remarked, "Why is it missing $75?" This seemingly harmless comment touched on Jianguo's weakness, a person with an inferiority complex who was not accustomed to sarcastic jokes. Feeling his dignity was insulted, he could not control his anger and punched the colleague to the ground right at the company. Assaulting a colleague at the workplace was a serious violation of company discipline. The management was extremely angry and intended to fire Jang Guo immediately. In this critical situation, Shu Jian once again stood up for him. With his reputation and position, he persuaded management to give Jang Guo another chance, promising to closely monitor his behavior in the future. Thanks to this intervention, Jang Guo kept his job. The incident made Jang Guo more deeply grateful for Shu Jian's kindness. In his eyes, Shu Jian was no longer simply a kind superior, but had become a confidant, a special friend in his life. Jiang Guo yearned for an equal relationship, a genuine friendship with Shu Jian, beyond the framework of a normal working relationship. However, from Shu Jian's perspective, the boundary between superior and subordinate still existed. Despite having goodwill and willingness to help, he still wanted to maintain an appropriate distance. Some of Jang Guo's overly familiar behaviors sometimes made Shu Jian uncomfortable. For example, in simple situations like taking the elevator together, if Jang Guo naturally stepped in before Shu Jian without yielding, Shu Jian's face would clearly show displeasure. With his sensitive nature, Jang Guo quickly noticed these subtle changes in Shu Jian's attitude, but he didn't seem to understand the underlying reasons. Beyond the awkward moments in the work environment, the relationship between Jang Guo and Shu Jian's family was also a source of growing discontent. Whenever Xiaohong, Shu Jian's wife, came from Wuxi to visit her husband in Nanjing, her treatment of Jang Guo made him feel his inferior position even more acutely. According to Jang Guo, Xiaohong often ordered him to do trivial household tasks like fetching laundry racks or carrying belongings, as if he were a servant rather than a family friend. What hurt Jang Guo more deeply was Shu Jian's silence in the face of these actions. Although witnessing his wife treating Jang Guo disrespectfully, Shu Jian never spoke up to defend or intervene. This silence gradually eroded Jang Guo's trust in the relationship that he thought had transcended the superior-subordinate framework. He painfully realized that while he considered Shu Jian as a close brother, the other party still viewed him as merely a subordinate. These seeds of discontent quickly developed into a major shock after the Chinese New Year in 2005. Without any prior notice, Shu Jian suddenly left the company to take the position of Deputy Director of Business Development at another pharmaceutical group in Nanjing. This news came to Jianguo as a surprise, particularly when he only found out on the day Shu Jian officially departed. The fact that they had lived together under the same roof, and Shu Jian had never mentioned this important decision, deeply disappointed Jianguo. After the initial anger, Jianguo tried to consider the issue more objectively. Shu Jian's new position not only brought an annual salary of about $30,000, but also had superior development prospects compared to the current company. Perhaps Shu Jian kept this decision secret because he wanted to avoid unnecessary complications at his old workplace. From this perspective, Shu Jian's silence also made some sense. After Shu Jian changed companies, the two also ended their cohabitation, with each moving to a new place. The physical distance gradually led to distance in their relationship. Without daily conversations, without shared meals, the two grew further apart. More significantly, in the work environment, lacking Shu Jian's support and guidance, Jang Guo's performance began to decline considerably. This situation left Jang Guo deeply disappointed and troubled. Could he only succeed when relying on Shu Jian? To prove his worth and ability, Jang Guo decided to leave his current company to start his own business, a bold but challenging move. The reality of entrepreneurship quickly emerged. He needed initial capital, a broad network of connections, and especially a stable customer base. Unfortunately, Jang Guo had no significant savings, poor social skills, and completely lacked a customer base. Faced with this difficult situation, what direction could he take to realize his entrepreneurial dream? In this difficult situation, Jang Guo first sought advice from his former teacher, his master's thesis advisor, about his business idea. The experienced professor gave practical advice. Jianguo should patiently excel at his current job, stabilize his life in Nanjing, build a network of relationships, accumulate capital, and then think about starting a business. This was wise advice, stemming from experience and genuine concern. However, with his sensitive psychology and typical overreaction, Jang Guo did not view the advice positively. Instead, he interpreted the advice as a lack of trust, believing that the teacher did not support him because he underestimated his abilities and doubted he could succeed. Dissatisfied with the professor's response, Jang Guo decided to seek support from Shu Jian. He actively arranged to meet Shu Jian and presented his business idea in detail. Surprisingly, Shu Jian's reaction was completely opposite to the professor's. Not only did he express support, but Shu Jian also actively analyzed and suggested many feasible business methods. In particular, Shu Jian promised to introduce his familiar client sources to Jianguo when the time was right. With a customer network from Shu Jian, he believed his entrepreneurial path was already halfway to success. After discussing the business idea, he hesitantly shared that he needed money to start the business. Faced with this request, Shu Jian appeared uncomfortable and explained that financially, he couldn't help much because all accounts were managed by his wife, and he didn't have the authority to withdraw a large amount on his own. Not discouraged by this obstacle, Jianguo decided to find alternative capital. He had to borrow $45,000 from relatives as initial capital. With this money and following Shu Jian's advice, Jianguo registered a small pharmaceutical company. Thanks to the relationships and customer sources Shu Jian introduced, his company quickly began operations and started generating revenue, bringing in the first profits. This initial success filled Jianguo with confidence and gratitude. To express his appreciation, he invited Shu Jian to a luxurious seafood restaurant to celebrate. The party took place in a joyful atmosphere, with both continuously toasting, drinking until they were slightly tipsy. The parting moment after the dinner was especially meaningful to Jianguo. He put his arm around Shu Jian's shoulders while Shu Jian supported his waist. The image of the two men side by side like blood brothers made Jianguo extremely happy and satisfied, feeling as if he had finally achieved the equal relationship he had been longing for. The relationship between Jianguo and Shu Jian developed in many more aspects. Shu Jian frequently invited Jianguo to join golf outings, and also invited him home as a guest many times. Notably, Xiaohong's attitude towards Jianguo also changed markedly, from the somewhat contemptuous behavior of before to a more polite and respectful attitude. Jianguo believed this was the respect that financial success brought, a dignity he had never felt before. In mid-October 2007, a major turning point occurred when Shu Jian unexpectedly came to Jianguo's home with an important request. He shared that his daughter was about to start elementary school, and the family needed to transfer their household registration to Nanjing to facilitate her education. Additionally, Shu Jian wanted to buy a house to welcome his wife and child to live with him. To implement this plan, he needed to borrow $75,000 and hoped Jianguo could help. Although Jianguo's total savings were only $45,000, all the money he had saved since starting his business, faced with the plea from someone he considered a benefactor, Jianguo reluctantly agreed to lend the entire amount. Because of his trust and the friendship between them, Jianguo didn't even ask Shu Jian to write a promissory note, relying only on a simple verbal agreement. After receiving the loan, Shu Jian purchased an apartment in Gulu District, Nanjing, for nearly $300,000. In November 2007, when Jianguo came to help Shu Jian move, he was extremely shocked by the family's luxurious possessions, rare mahogany furniture, high-end exercise equipment, a valuable antique collection, along with Xiaohong's countless expensive cosmetics. The estimated total value of these assets amounted to over $150,000. An astonishing figure for Jianguo. Realizing the true wealth of Shu Jian's family stirred a complex, indescribable emotion in Jianguo. On one hand, he realized that the $45,000 he had lent was actually just a small part compared to Shu Jian's enormous assets. This thought made him feel somewhat foolish for having emptied his savings, while the other party probably didn't really need it. On the other hand, What troubled Jang Guo more was that after more than a month since the loan, Shu Jian had not once mentioned repayment. Meanwhile, Jang Guo still didn't have his own home, wasn't married, and now had no reserve funds to implement his personal plans. This contrast became more painful when he realized he had sacrificed everything to help Shu Jian, but this person seemed not to care about his situation. The sense of injustice increased when Jianguo witnessed Shu Jian's family continuously buying new luxury items, from large LCD TVs to new cars, while still not mentioning anything about the debt. Although full of doubts and discomfort, due to his emphasis on friendship and desire to save face, Jianguo still didn't have the courage to actively remind Shu Jian about this money. Besides financial issues, another source of discontent in the relationship between Jianguo and Shu Jian's family related to personal life. Being still single in his 30s, Jianguo became the target of matchmaking efforts by the Shu couple. As a nurse in Wuxi, Xiaohong had a wide network of acquaintances, especially many single women, so she agreed to her husband's request to introduce potential matches to Jianguo. However, the dating experience was not smooth. According to Jianguo, the first girl Xiaohong introduced revealed her materialistic nature after just a few meetings. She continuously demanded he buy expensive clothes and high-end cosmetics. Realizing he was at risk of becoming prey in this relationship, Jang Guo quickly ended it after a few meetings. Subsequent candidates introduced by Xiaohong also did not satisfy him for various reasons. The situation became more tense in late July 2008 when Shu Jian invited Jang Guo to his home for a meal. During the dinner, the topic of finding a partner for Jang Guo was brought up for discussion. Xiaohong made a statement that deeply offended Jang Guo. "You come from the countryside, you shouldn't set your expectations too high, otherwise it will be difficult to find someone." Feeling his dignity wounded, Jang Guo could not control his anger and responded bitterly. "If all women nowadays are like this, as materialistic as you, then it's fine not to find one." This remark was like a bucket of cold water, causing both Xiaohong and Shu Jian's faces to change color, clearly showing their displeasure with Jang Guo's response. After this incident, Shu Jian gradually reduced meetings and invitations with Jang Guo. August 2008 marked a difficult period as the national economy fell into a state of stagnation. Jianguo's pharmaceutical company was not immune, with alarming revenue declines. The situation became more serious when the fractured relationship with Shu Jian led to the loss of many important customers. Faced with the risk of closing his business, in early October, Jang Guo decided to actively seek out Shu Jian with the desire to mend the relationship between them. Knowing Shu Jian's hobby of collecting antiques, he went to great lengths to find and buy many ancient coins from the antique market as gifts, hoping this present would please Shu Jian. However, Shu Jian's reaction deeply disappointed Jang Guo. Instead of appreciating the gift, Shu Jian merely glanced at the ancient coins and then casually threw them into a drawer, as if they were worthless items. This action touched Jang Guo's self-esteem, making him extremely angry, but he dared not show it. Instead, he retreated to the bathroom and punched the wall hard to release his emotions. When Shu Jian coldly asked what was wrong, he simply replied, "Nothing," swallowing his anger inside. By 2009, the financial situation of the company continued to deteriorate, and Jang Guo urgently needed capital to maintain operations. In this difficult situation, he had to call Shu Jian, mentioning the return of the borrowed $45,000. Shu Jian replied that he needed to discuss this matter with his wife, but there was no follow-up afterward. Despite Jang Guo calling multiple times, Shu Jian always found ways to avoid the topic, and eventually stopped answering calls when he saw Jang Guo's number. Faced with this phone avoidance, Jang Guo decided to go directly to Shu Jian's home to resolve the issue face-to-face. However, his efforts were futile as the Shu family implemented a closed-door, stay-still strategy. Although there were clearly people inside the house, no one answered the door knocks. This behavior made Jang Guo extremely angry, to the point where he sent an ultimatum to Shu Jian. If the money wasn't returned, he would sue. Confronted with the legal threat, Shu Jian remained calm, continuing his avoidance tactics and showing no concern. Backed into a corner, Jang Guo reluctantly sought legal advice about the possibility of litigation. But the legal reality dealt a heavy blow to his last hope. The lawyer frankly stated that since the loan had no documentation, no recorded agreement, the case had almost no chance of winning. The harsh truth stunned Jang Guo. He painfully realized that his generous action, lending money without requiring documentation out of a sense of honor, had become a serious mistake, sowing the seeds of disaster for himself. On June 28th, in another attempt to confront Shu Jian, Jang Guo happened to encounter the entire family leaving their home, preparing to get into their car. The image of them happy, smiling, and relaxed burned away any remaining restraint. Jianguo rushed over, blocked Shu Jian's path, and demanded the return of his money. Hearing the conversation, Xiaohong's face immediately darkened, while Shu Jian hurriedly reassured with a vague promise that he would prepare the money in the next few days. After saying this, they quickly got into the car and left. Jianguo returned home with a heavy heart, immersed in thoughts about everything that had transpired. He painfully realized that the person he had wholeheartedly trusted, viewed as a confidant for many years, turned out to be just an exploiter, willing to borrow and then default on debt without hesitation. The contrast between how he treated Shu Jian and how Shu Jian repaid him made the wound even deeper. While his company was on the verge of bankruptcy, Shu Jian's family lived in a luxurious apartment, shopping extravagantly, happily enjoying life, all with Jang Guo's hard-earned $45,000 with no intention of repaying. Each time he thought of this scene, the anger in Jang Guo erupted more violently. After many sleepless nights, he came to a decision. He had to take action to regain justice for himself. On the morning of July 14, 2009, an unusual incident occurred at Shu Jian's workplace. Despite having a business trip scheduled, Shu Jian did not appear at the office as expected. After unsuccessful attempts to contact him, colleagues became worried when they realized Shu Jian had been absent without notice for 2 consecutive days, something that had never happened with such a responsible person. A colleague decided to go to Shu Jian's home to check on the situation. After knocking on the door with no answer, this person tried calling the phone and heard the ringtone from inside the apartment, but still no one answered. More alarmingly, a strange odor began to emanate from the door gap, becoming increasingly pungent. Feeling something was wrong, the colleague quickly contacted local police. When police arrived at the scene, they encountered the horrifying scene described initially. Shu Jian and his entire family had been brutally killed in their apartment. The most shocking aspect was the presence of Jianguo, who sat motionless on the sofa, with no attempt to escape. When he saw the police enter, he simply said, "I killed them. Arrest me." The authorities immediately proceeded to arrest Jang Guo. However, during the interrogation process, Jang Guo's behavior showed many contradictory and puzzling points. Except for the initial confession when police first questioned him, he subsequently and consistently denied responsibility for the crime until the trial. His testimony changed many times, sometimes admitting he was the perpetrator, other times blaming unknown individuals. In one interrogation session, Jang Guo presented a complex story that on July 11th, he was invited to Shu Jian's home. Upon entering, he discovered Shu Jian arguing with 3 unknown men. He intended to leave but was prevented by these individuals. According to his statement, Jang Guo, Shu Jian's daughter, and the 3 men stayed in the apartment. The next day, when Xiaohong returned, she also got into an argument with these 3 men. During the conflict, the strangers used a hammer to kill the entire Shu Jian family, then forced Jang Guo to go out and buy tools to dismember the victims, while also sending someone to monitor him to ensure he didn't escape. Jang Guo claimed he was merely a victim coerced in that situation. However, Jang Guo's story quickly collapsed in the face of irrefutable evidence from the police investigation. When examining the crime scene, police confirmed that besides Jang Guo, there were no other living persons at the apartment. Data from surveillance cameras in the hallway and elevator also confirmed an important fact. During the time frame of the crime, apart from the Shu family and Jang Guo, no strangers entered or exited the apartment. The crime scene was discovered with doors and windows tightly closed, with no signs of forced entry. Forensic results further clarified the situation. All footprints, fingerprints, and traces of activity at the scene belonged only to the Shu family and Jang Guo, with no traces of any strangers as Jang Guo had claimed. Witnesses also played an important role in establishing the truth. Hardware store and supermarket employees testified that it was Jang Guo who had purchased the cutting machine and related tools. Notably, a building security guard confirmed seeing Jang Guo leave the building with a plastic bag containing red objects resembling body tissues. Based on information from Jang Guo's initial confession, police found a plastic bag containing human tissue under a bridge northwest of the apartment complex, with DNA test results matching the victims from the Shu family. The physical evidence on Jang Guo's body was also undeniable. His hands still clearly showed distinctive blisters from prolonged use of a cutting machine. All this evidence pointed to one conclusion. The person who cruelly murdered and tried to dismember the Shu family from beginning to end was Jang Guo alone. Nevertheless, the big question remained: what exactly happened that day, and what motive drove Jang Guo to such an extreme action? In his first interrogation after being arrested, Jang Guo gave an account of the events of that fateful day, July 11th. According to him, he went to Shu Jian's home with the purpose of reclaiming the $45,000 loan. Initially, Shu Jian appeared cooperative and agreed to write a promissory note, but his wife Xiaohong vehemently objected, denying the entire loan and even picking up a hammer to threaten Jang Guo. In that tense situation, Jang Guo grabbed the hammer from Xiaohong and in an uncontrolled fit of rage, used the hammer to attack, causing her death. Afterward, when Shu Jian reacted to his wife's death, Jang Guo continued to use the same weapon to kill Shu Jian. The tragedy didn't stop there. The couple's young daughter had witnessed the entire incident and began crying hysterically. Fearing leaving a witness, Jang Guo dragged the little girl into the bathroom and continued his cruel act, resulting in all three family members' deaths. However, Shu Jian's family had a completely different perspective on the motive for the crime. Shu Jian's mother firmly denied the entire story about the loan. She asserted that her son had a strong financial situation. The money for the house deposit came from stock investment profits and bank loans, completely unrelated to Jianguo. Shu Jian's sister also presented a similar view, suggesting that the true motive of the crime was opposite to Jianguo's testimony, not because Shu Jian borrowed money and didn't repay, but because Jianguo's company was experiencing capital difficulties. He approached Shu Jian for a loan but was refused, and this refusal angered him to the point of murdering the entire family. On July 7, 2010, the Nanjing Intermediate People's Court in Jiangsu Province convicted Jang Guo of intentional homicide, sentenced him to death, deprived him of political rights for life, and ordered him to compensate the victim's family with $207,660. Jang Guo was not satisfied and appealed, but was rejected by the higher people's court. On the afternoon of August 12, 2011, Jang Guo was executed. Until his execution, he never admitted to the murders. In Jang Guo's personal account, he described himself as someone not good at communication, but who strived hard, was grateful, and ultimately was taken advantage of. A pitiful figure. From the relationship he described with Shu Jian, we can see that Jang Guo always wanted to become an equal, a brother to Shu Jian. Jang Guo had an introverted personality, was poor at communication, came from an ordinary family background, and his work abilities were not outstanding. Therefore, Shu Jian, with his successful career and happy family, became an object of admiration and a goal to strive for. Shu Jian's support and care made him feel that his life and career were gradually improving. He felt as if he had boarded a fast train, helping him survive in a competitive work environment. But Shu Jian's sudden departure and subsequent distancing significantly impacted his work and life. He wanted to live at Shu Jian's social level, thinking that by becoming Shu Jian's friend, he would be closer to that goal. But after seeing Shu Jian's family circumstances, he suddenly realized there was truly a large gap between himself and Shu Jian. This plunged him back into the abyss of inferiority, making his attitude toward others become sensitive and suspicious, always feeling that others looked down on him. The story ends here. So, was the $45,000 loan the trigger for this crime or not? What do you think about this case? Please share in the comments below. Thank you for following along, and see you in the next videos.